welcome back to On the Fly. Today we're previewing the 2025 Women's World Championship happening in Česká Budějovice, Czechia. So, hop into it today, starting with a little bit of the history of this event. Look back sort of the last 4 years of this tournament with Canada winning 3 of the last 4, winning in 24, 22, and 21. The U.S. did win back in 2023 at this tournament. And really, it's been a tournament dominated by 2 teams, the Americans and the Canadians. And there's a little bit of sprinkled in action here and there of an upset or an upset to be. Think back to 2019, where Finland nearly took the entire tournament on home ice as well. And that's exactly what I think is going to happen this year, where we'll see, Canada, the U.S. as sort of those heavy favorites. But I think you'll see teams like Finland, teams like Czechia sort of sprinkle in their action here and there. And I don't think it's as black and white as Canada, U.S. in the final this year, as it's been these last couple of years, where, especially for the Czechs, I think they're a team at this tournament that are going to surprise a lot of people. And even teams like Canada and the U.S., where most of the time in years past, those games have been more of a walk. I don't think it's going to be as black and white this year as it may seem. But sort of to couple that, Group A, Czechs are coming up. It's going to be an interesting division, I think, for that Group A, right? Where you take a look, we'll bring up the groups now with Canada, USA, Finland, Czechs, and Switzerland in Group A. In Group B, you have Germany, Sweden, Norway, Hungary, and Japan. And for this Group A, you kind of have your top 2 with Canada and the US. Then you have sort of your next 2 with the Czechs and Finland. And then you have your 5th team, likely going to be Switzerland, for Group A. A reminder that all teams in Group A do make the quarterfinals, unlike some of the other IIHF tournaments, and we'll see eventually, of course, if that'll change at some point, but not likely. But until then, Group A is more about seeding, and you want to try and be in those top 3 places, get yourself an easier quarterfinal matchup. You think who you'll be playing in that Group A. If you do get one of the top spots, you're looking at, in Group B, you're likely seeing Germany coming in the top spots. Whoever gets 3rd place in the group, you're looking sort of Czechs or Finns will likely play a team like Germany. And then teams like maybe Japan or Sweden will likely be the rest of those quarterfinal teams. Hungary is a team you can never count out. They're sort of that scrappy trap style team where they're probably not going to win games by a high scoring margin, but they might win a game here or there. They might steal a game with a hot goaltender and net. So that might be something to keep an eye on there for Hungary. As for Norway, recently promoted team, I don't expect too much out of Norway here. They're a team that I think has a shot to win a game here in Group B, but I don't think they should be considered for contention for the playoffs. Likely going to see themselves to the relegation game, but crazier things, of course, have happened. Norway is going to be that scrappy kind of team, and we'll see if they're able to continue that into this tournament where, we've seen them in the recent Olympic qualifiers, not exactly what they were hoping for, but at the same time, Norway is one of those scrappy kind of teams that never know what they can do. Of course, they go on a hot streak at a hot goaltender. And as this tournament has shown, a hot goaltender can get you into a playoff spot pretty quickly. So in Group B, you're sort of looking for Germany to be in that top spot. I expect Germany to at least make a push in this tournament to get back into the top group. And it wouldn't surprise me to see in the placement game. We'll talk about the schedule in a little bit. And the one other thing I'll mention right here is we are going to come out with a prediction video where we'll predict every game at this tournament and sort of with the following bracket and the playoffs and all of that. So be sure to come back tomorrow. We'll have the full predictions for this tournament. And one of my favorite things to do is look back at the end of this tournament about how wrong I was, as we did the juniors not too long ago. And it wasn't too great. I'll say that much. But with that being said, we'll move it along here now to the schedule. So we start here on April 9th, 5 a.m. Sweden will play Germany. Finland will play the U.S. at 9 a.m. Czechs will play the Swiss at 1 o'clock p.m. All these times will be in Eastern Standard Time. My game of the day here is going to be a mix of Finland and the U.S. and Czechs and Switzerland. I think the Czechs and the Swiss are going to be a good game. Probably going to be your game of the day. I think whenever you see a team like Finland, though, it's very hard to count them out because they play that scrappy kind of style where they might get blown out they might keep the game close and make it a real run for the U.S. I think it's a real good test for the U.S. early in this tournament. Obviously, you play Canada later on. But I think this is the first real test we'll see for this U.S. team to sort of see where they're at, especially on that team factor. We think sort of the way the team's built, a lot of college players coming in. We'll see how that sort of meshes in. But this is still a team that is going to contend. And you think about those big two, Canada and the U.S. Canada goes with the more PWHL professional heavy approach. The Americans go with a younger approach. And what we always see, you think back to last year, obviously tight to the very end with Canada taking it. But I think, especially at this tournament, it's an interesting approach, especially as you look next year when the Olympics are coming on. For many of these players, this is a tryout for these guys. So we'll see if more or less, they will come and play that style where, yeah, we know we're fighting for a spot on the Olympic team, but always interesting to see there. So for me, game of the day on April 9th will be Finland, USA, or the Czechs and the Swiss. I think the Czechs, Swiss are always a good game. You think just the way these two teams play, and it'll be a nice tight checking game right to the very end. I don't expect it to be that big of a blowout, but I do expect the Czechs to take it. We'll move on now to April 10th. We have Japan playing Norway at 5 a.m., Sweden playing Hungary at 9 a.m., Canada playing Finland at 1. And once again here, I think Finland's a weird team at these kind of tournaments where you can't really count them out because they might just be the game of the day, but they also might get blown out. So I think my backup here probably going to be Sweden and Hungary. Hungary is a team sort of hangs around, and they aren't necessarily your blown away team in terms of goals, but they are able to contend. And I think when we look at the Swedes and Hungary, they're very similar in their capacity, and I think for Sweden, they're looking to try and break through. If they can break through early, Sweden probably is going to go on a run in this game. But if they can't, Hungary's able to hold them early. Look for this one to really come down to the wire, and it would not surprise me to see Hungary take this one. So those are the games on April 10th. Move on here now to April 11th with Hungary playing Japan at 5 a.m., Switzerland playing Canada at 9 a.m., U.S. playing the Czechs at 1. And I think this U.S.-Czech game is going to be one that's going to surprise a lot of people. This Czech team at this tournament, playing in front of a home crowd. Yes, I probably butchered the city name off the top, but for playing in front of a home crowd, we saw it with the Men's World Championship last year, where the Czechs just seem to have that extra gear when playing on home ice. And I expect that to continue into this tournament, where we think, for the Czechs, you play on home ice, you get the home support. It's that little extra edge that really puts you over the top. You think back a couple years to 2019 when Finland played in Espoo in Finland, and you saw them take their game to the next level. They beat Canada in the semis. They nearly beat the U.S. In the gold medal game. And I think it's going to be very similar this year for the Czechs, and they have that extra boost. They have a good team that they're putting out on the ice. So it wouldn't surprise me to see the Czechs, especially early in this tournament, make a name for themselves. So this game here, where we'll see the Czechs go up against the U.S., is my game of the day. I'm definitely keeping an eye on this one because this is an upset-worthy watch kind of game, where if the U.S. can't get going early and the Czechs are able to play their style, don't be surprised to see the Czechs take this game. I know it's the big bad USA, and we'll get to Canada in a second here. But at the same time, it's this Czech team is dangerous, and it would not surprise me to see them go all the way in this tournament and even win the gold on home ice, which is obviously, you're thinking on paper, you have the big bad Canada, you got the big bad USA, but the Czechs and the Finns are always teams that sort of fight their way and dogfight their way through this tournament, so keep an eye out for them. Move on now to April 12th for the two-game day with Norway playing Germany at 9 a.m., Finland playing the Czechs at 1. I think this Finland-Czech game will be a really good one. Norway and Germany is also an interesting one. Well, obviously, Norway isn't necessarily the team that are expected to do all hot at this tournament, but they are a team that could be interesting. And for Germany, they're the favorites in Group B. A lot of pressure on them to try and get that top spot. You want to avoid having to play Canada or the U.S. in that first quarterfinal matchup, because if you don't, you're probably going home, right? You think the second or third spot in Group B is very different than the top spot in Group B. Getting to play that third place in Group A, where you're looking at a team like, for example, a Finland or a Czechia. You'd rather play those two teams rather than Canada or the U.S. Even doesn't matter what game those teams bring. for Canada or the US, they're still going to put a solid performance forward. So if you're Germany, that top spot in Group B is something to look for. So I expect them to come out strong in this game against Norway. But Norway is a team, they'll be an interesting one at this tournament. I still think Germany takes it. But for Finland and the Czechs, my game of the day, you think about what's at stake here. You get to avoid having to play the Swiss in the quarterfinals, assuming the rest of this tournament plays out as it's expected. And you get to play a team like Germany in the first round, and then that quarterfinal matchup. So lots at stake here for both Finland and Czechia. I do expect them to, more or less come out and play, especially with these two teams. It's seeming like it's going to be sort of that bronze medal matchup that we've become so accustomed to. But at the same time, these two teams are looking for a big impact at this tournament, and maybe that home crowd advantage might just set them over the edge just that little bit more. Move on now here to April 13th, where we have Hungary playing Norway at 5 a.m., Japan playing Sweden at 9 a.m., and Canada playing the U.S. at 1 o'clock p.m. And these are the games that I think all of them are real game of the days. But of course, as the Canadian fan, I have to take Canada versus the U.S. as the game of the day. Hungary and Norway, two teams that are going to be clawing to try and get out of those bottom two relegation spots. Because remember, the bottom two teams do get relegated. As well, for Japan and Sweden, two teams fighting for that second place, or that, even might end up being that top spot in Group B, depending on how the Germany games go. Sweden and Japan could be two very likely teams to end up in that spot. So, for that game very well may decide the top of Group B. So that might be another game of the day. And then, of course, the classic one, Canada-US, to determine who gets the top spot in Group A, ends up playing the third seed in Group B. Obviously not as important in the grand scheme of things. But when you look at the semifinal matchups, you'd rather be playing the lower seed than having to play a top-tier team. So for Canada, for the U.S., obviously whenever these two countries play each other, lots to play for. And in this one, it's going to be no different. That's coming up on April 13th. Then on to April 14th we go, with Germany playing Hungary at 5 a.m., Finland playing the Swiss at 9 a.m. Eastern, and Czechs playing Canada at 1 p.m. And I'm going to give the game of the day here to the Czechs. Again, I think the Czechs are a team at this tournament. You're going to hear me say it a lot. Home ice advantage, a team that is the dark horse coming into this tournament. They're a team that really scares me. So when they're playing Canada, even more so, it's a 1 o'clock game, prime time in Czechia. Do not be surprised to see the Czech crowd and basically the Czech team really take it to that next level, just because they're in their home country. We saw it in the World Championships last year for the men's. Don't be surprised to see it similar in the women's for this year as well. Then on to April 15th we go. Norway plays Sweden at 5 a.m. Germany plays Japan at 9 a.m. And the U.S. plays Switzerland at 1 p.m. My game of the day here is going to be Germany versus Japan, coming up at 9 a.m. This is a game very well, once again, could decide the top spot in Group B, but lots to play for. We already talked about it a little bit. But for Japan, they're a team at this tournament that either plays very well and finds the back of the net a lot, or they go goal droughtless and they have some problems. So for a team like Japan, they don't need to blow teams out, but they do have to find ways to get the puck into the back of the net. They play a good style of defense. They have a good collapsing style. All they have to do is find their chances and bury them. And we've seen that be a problem for this team, for this Japanese team over years past, where they just struggle to score. And we even saw it in the qualifiers, where they found that goal scoring, and it really helped them in that tournament, where, otherwise, you don't have that goal scoring, and all of a sudden everything goes down. So for Japan, I'll be curious to see throughout this entire tournament to see where their goal scoring is. If they can find it early, look for Japan to be a serious contender at this tournament. If they look like they're going on another goal drought, probably not going to do so hot. So for Japan, playing Germany obviously the top team in Group B, especially on paper. I do expect them to definitely make their mark at this tournament. Would not surprise me to see them take the placement game. But at the same time, nothing is written in stone. You have to play hockey. You have to play the full 60 minutes. Otherwise, crazy stuff happens, like Canada losing to Latvia in the World Juniors. Sorry, I'm still on it. But anyway, with that being said, let's move on to the quarterfinals. On to the playoff round. So the time slots on April 17th for the quarterfinals will be 4 a.m., 7:30 a.m., 11 a.m., and 2:30 p.m. all in Eastern, of course. And the way the seedings work is A1 plays B3, A2 plays B2, A3 plays B1, and A4 versus A5. It's in terms of the seeding. Remember, teams B, fourth in Group B and fifth in Group B both get relegated. So for these teams, obviously, if you're in Group B, you want to get that top seed. Avoid having to play the two powerhouses in Canada and the U.S. And then you also have a tough matchup, right, with the Czechs or the Finns, likely, assuming nothing crazy happens. And then you also have the Swiss is likely going to be that fifth team in Group A. At least that's as far as my predictions. That normally stays pretty constant throughout time. You know, the Czechs and the Finns are kind of that next echelon of teams. Then you have Switzerland. I think Germany this year is pretty close to Switzerland, so I'll be interested to see there if there's any turnover. So that's something to keep an eye on there. But for the quarterfinals, you know, you're looking for the B3, B2 teams likely to get knocked out by Canada and the U.S. A3, B1 is one that I always keep an eye on, because the truth is it's never written in stone, especially with Germany this year. Would not surprise me to see them knock on the doors of a team like Czechia or even Finland. And then, of course, the placement game will come later. We'll talk about that in just a second here. And then, of course, Switzerland will play whoever the non-team likely is between Czechia and Finland. So that'll be your quarterfinal matchup. Then we move on to the semifinals. Remember that every team does get reseeded after the quarterfinal round. That'll come up on April 19th, which will come up at 9 a.m. and 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. Will be the semifinals, as well as the placement game at 5 a.m. between the 5th and 6th seeded team at the time of the game. So whether that's two teams in Group A, whoever the 5th and 6th, basically the non-quarterfinal teams, whoever the two highest teams not in the quarterfinal or in the semifinals rather, will play in the placement game. Because remember the importance of being in Group A, automatic placement into the quarterfinals instead of having to fight your way through. So you'll likely see, assuming everything works out as normal, likely going to be a mix of Germany, Switzerland, some mixture of Czechia or Finland. Likely it'll be Switzerland and Germany as the two teams, but of course it'll matter who comes to top of Group B. Getting that shot to make their way into the top of Group A, always something to keep an eye on there. And the semifinals, the winner of the two quarterfinals, or the four winners of the quarterfinals, will play the semifinals. 1 plays 4, 2 plays 3, 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. for the semis. Then move on to the gold medal and bronze medal games coming up on April 20th. At bronze medal at 8 a.m., as well as the gold medal game at 12 noon. So once again, these are the important games for these teams. Obviously, lots to play for Canada, looking for a medal contention. Same with the U.S. Honestly, same with Czechs and Finns, both those teams looking to really make their mark at this tournament. I think Switzerland's expectations here, they're looking to make that semifinal and get to play for a medal. Similar with Germany, I think they're a team very well could be setting their sights on making it into the top group. As for teams like Japan and Sweden, making the quarterfinals and even winning a game would be crucial for them. As for Norway and Hungary, likely just looking to make it into the quarterfinals would be their win in and of itself. But that is going to wrap it up here for the preview. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. If you like, drop a like. If you really like, consider subscribing. Tell all your friends and comment down below your thoughts on the 2025 Women's World Championship. Until next time, see you.